Hello, hello. I am Mark Reid. Welcome to the channel. A bit of an impromptu one today. I've got with me my friend and your humble narrator, Atheist Junior. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, I'm loving every minute of it. I'm so happy to be here, Mark. I'm very excited. So
You
thank you for
sound
hosting me.
sarcastic. You sound so sarcastic. I don't know why. It's just,
Me?
I,
No.
yeah.
I'm never sarcastic, but I am very happy to be in your company, Mark.
It's awesome to see you always, AJ. I always enjoy doing stuff with you, mate. But today you have brought me something awful and dreadful, and I don't forgive you. And that is sarcastic. Of course, I'll always forgive you, always. So today AJ's brought to my attention a massive document of from A Bit of Orange, which apparently is a Christian YouTube channel, and they sort of do stuff offline on their own site as well, I noticed, sort of outlining why, or answering atheism, putting us atheists in our place, right? So this is sort of this massive spiel, but apparently A Bit of Orange is a Christian comedy and edutainment, apparently. Edutain. I wasn't aware that's a word, but edutainment is a word, apparently. Family friendly and thought provoking. It's founded on the idea that big questions need friendly answers, and a friend is someone who tells you the truth you need to hear. Let me guess what that truth is. Jesus loves you.
That's literally what he says at the end of every single video. How did you
Oh,
know?
really?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just got a hashtag here of Jesus
Oh,
loves you
okay.
down the
Yeah.
bottom. So
Yeah.
I'm
That's his
sort of
thing.
making that rational leap to get to, yeah. All right. Well, I mean, oh boy. So if you want to share it, we can start to go through it and stuff. Yeah,
Didn't you know that Jesus used hashtags in the Bible?
oh yeah, yeah.
Of course.
Hashtag Sodom should be burnt. Yes.
Hashtag blessed.
Hashtag blessed.
Yeah, so I've seen this guy's content. There's a great video Professor Stick did, if you're familiar with his channel, that sort of put um, A Bit of Orange, brought him to my attention years
Right.
ago.
Mm,
And he says that his content and his channel is family friendly, but he writes these terrible blog articles. Some of
right.
them are really mean spirited articles that are pro life, and they're not family friendly
Right.
at
And so
all.
this is one of those blog articles that we're looking at here, or is this something else?
This is a link to quote unquote books that he's written that he's put online.
Oh
Um,
dear.
there are links to his blog articles on the site, but this in particular is not one of them.
Right. Okay, so this is more just a sort of a because I did notice its link is WordPress, wasn't it? So it's that is a blogging site. So this
Yep.
is more just a rant out in the world and sort of him blogging. I
It's
don't know.
sort of a transcript of a video series that he did called Answering Atheism,
Right,
if that
right.
makes sense.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm prepared to be thrilled. I must admit, I did flick through it when you gave it to me, and it seems to be um, sort of very loose ranting. It's very hard to get through. It's very dense kind of
Yes.
thing. So I think we should just go over the sort of overview of it, and just start on it. And you know, I'm happy to go through more of it, but we certainly can't do all of it today. So prepare yourselves, because there's no way we can get through a document this size in one sitting. There's absolutely no way at all. So what I'll do is I'll put it on the screen,
Yeah.
and you can go through it, AJ.
Yeah. So this Answering Atheism, there's the first section of this is I think about 11 or 12 pages. So I think we're going to tackle that, and that should do her. But this is the guy's channel avatar. So he makes content. The content itself is visually pretty interesting because it's some light animation, kind of stick figure animation, and the production quality. It certainly takes some talent to make the content clearly, but the information is just so bad.
Mm,
So that's the problem I have.
yep.
So, okay. See, you can see the different sections here. And we're going to just do this first one, what is atheism? But obviously it
Well,
goes on and
that
on.
looks like a contents list, but there's no page numbers, which is
Right.
kind of weird because, on a PDF you can set up page numbers very, very easily. So I'm not sure why that was missed. I mean, if we're critiquing this as a book, so he claims, then, your table of contents doesn't have page numbers in it for a start. You might want to rectify that.
Well, this guy is a Hovind protege, so it's fitting.
Oh, yeah. So Hovind protege doesn't recognize page numbers or taxation amounts. That's what he doesn't recognize.
Yeah. So
isn't good with numbers. Yeah,
right.
Hovind not known for his ability with numbers.
So
yeah, sorry, go AJ.
I'm just going to go through this flow chart real quick, and then we can add sort of our comments. So it says, what is atheism? And chapter 1 is defining our terms, which I think is a good way to start.
Sure.
Now, if those definitions are going to be correct and something that you and me can agree upon with him is going to be another story. But so the flow chart, it starts off saying, do you believe that God does exist? If you answer yes, that means you're a theist. I'd say that that's fair.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, do you believe that God exists? No. Then it asks, do you believe God doesn't exist? Now, right off the bat, I have a problem with the way this is worded because it's equivocating these two sentences saying, do you believe God doesn't exist? When I think that's shifting the burden of proof, because most people who are atheists would just say that they're not convinced of the claims of a given religion. They don't.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So they
I
don't
get what
believe
he's
that
going
God doesn't
for.
exist.
Well, I get what he's going for. Really, so wait, basically he's arguing for the structure of atheism that's sort of relevant to philosophy of religion, where you've got somebody that believes that God exists is a theist, someone that doesn't believe God exists is either an atheist or a theist, depending on your position on the proposition. But the proposition is not, do you believe that God exists, right? The proposition is, does God exist? In that philosophical structure, does God exist? If you say yes, then you're a theist. If you say no, then you're an atheist. And if you say I don't know, then you're agnostic. So that's the structure that they set up in philosophy of religion. So this is wrong on two levels. Basically, I mean, it's not really wrong. I mean, that's a perfectly valid structure. And the reason why philosophy of religion doesn't sort of say, hey, well, I don't know isn't atheist or theist, is because if you say I don't know, you're not giving a response to the proposition. You're not saying true or false. So that's why it's organized like that. Now, that's just one definition. But he's done it wrong here. He's done it completely wrong for philosophy of religion. He's done it as the question, do you believe God exists? That's more colloquial sort of definition of atheism. And he sort of said, no, then there's another question. No, it's only one proposition. Do you believe God exists? Yes, you're a theist. No, you're an atheist. That's it.
Yeah. And just the definition of belief from Google says an acceptance that a statement is true or that something exists. So just the word belief on its own, I think, qualifies with this.
But what you've got to remember is that words, and especially things like atheism, is polysemous. It has different meanings according to context, even within religion, even within philosophy, rather. So a word that may mean one thing in one context may mean another in another context. Like, that's just the way that words work. The dictionary doesn't prescribe how words are used. Words are used, and then the dictionary describes how they're used. So there is an argument among atheists whether atheism is this idea of, well, if you don't believe a God exists, you're an atheist, or whether an atheist is someone who believes that God does not exist, and those are two totally different things. I'm neutral on that. I don't care. To be honest, I don't care. If you want to call me an agnostic or an atheist, that's fine. I don't care. The important thing is your position. So if you're using it in a philosophy of religion, as long as you're making that clear, I'm fine with that definition. I don't know if you are.
I guess I've always understood it as uh, atheism means that you claim to know that there's no God or gods, and agnosticism is where you don't know. And the way that I sort of
Yeah.
apply this to my own viewpoint is, and I've said this before, is just that when it comes to man-made earthly religions, I can say that I know that those gods don't exist because I know that human beings, men, wrote all the holy texts for those books and that they're not divinely
Right.
inspired. But when it comes to some sort of higher power outside of the planet Earth, then I would have to say I don't know because I can't check on that. I can't say for sure like the way I can when it comes to
Mm,
man-made religions because we have anthropology, we have religious history that people have studied.
right.
But what I really get confused about here, so I right off the bat, I would say that this agnosticism thing is wrong, but it says, "Do you believe God doesn't exist?" No, agnosticism. Isn't that the same thing as saying, "Do you believe God does exist?" Yes.
No, there can be two positions on that. One is that I sort of like if you say no, I don't believe that God exists. You could be taking an atheism stance, or you could be taking a I don't know stance. So you could be taking a well, I don't know one way or the other. I decline until I've got further information. I don't believe it, but I haven't been convinced. There's a lot of there's a lot of nuance in there. Um,
So just answering no to do you believe God doesn't exist doesn't mean that you do believe that he does exist. Because this is where I'm confused. Because to me, it seems like
right. Uh,
this should loop back to theism. Like,
well, the first question should catch that because it's a flow chart, right? And it's a terrible flow chart
right.
because it's answering anyway. So do you believe that God does exist? If you answer yes, you'll never get to the part that says, do you believe God doesn't exist? Right. So you shouldn't get to that no question if you answer the first one yes and you're a theist. So presumably, following the logic of this flowchart, you should never get to that point if you're a theist. So that's a secondary question, which is why this isn't a philosophical proposition. The proposition should be, does God exist? And it have three answers. Yes for theism, no for atheism, and I don't know for
See,
agnosticism
that's so
or
much simpler.
uncertain.
That's so much
Well,
simpler.
yeah, it's bad. But I mean, what you described with sort of it comes more complex when you're talking about individual gods because you're talking about local versus global atheism, local being those religions you're aware of, and global being some deistic god out there that could be possible in some possible world kind of thing.
True.
So I'm probably atheist on both sort of definitions, and I don't care which one you're using as long as what you're using is made clear. So he's obviously using the philosophy of religion definition, and that's fine. I've got no problem with that. Doesn't matter if people want to use it colloquially and say, "Hey, an atheist is just someone that doesn't believe in a god." I'm cool with that too. That's fine. I've got no problem as long as it's made clear where your position is. It doesn't matter what it's called. It could be called beaverism for all I care. It doesn't, as long as we make it clear where we're coming from, that's fine. But
He
yeah,
doesn't
terrible
he doesn't do
flowchart.
that. Yeah, he doesn't do that.
I wish he
So,
would. I wish he would.
yeah, I guess my issue with this second box here is that it's written this way in order for him to later on capitalize on this sort of wonky definition in order to make a fallacious argument. So we'll see that. And I want to move
Okay,
on and not spend too much time on here, but I
sure.
guess I would just ask you real quick, like, what you think a better sentence would be for this second box, because what I would say is that it should say, do you believe that God does exist, or do you not believe that God does exist? What do you think about that?
Well, the problem is that under philosophy of religion, somebody that does not believe that God exists could be atheist or agnostic, depending on their position. A much better way to do it would just be have one box and sort of say, does God exist, as the proposition, and then say yes, no, and I don't know, or uncertain. And then you would cover all bases and it would be fine.
I agree.
Yeah.
It's really this simple. That's funny
Well,
because it's not simple, and
it's needlessly complicated. Yes.
that's how this whole article is. So I'm just going to
Mm.
start reading this, and I'll just finish reading, and then we'll do our
Well, let
comments.
me know if you need a break because it's wordy. It is wordy.
I will absolutely do that. So the definition of atheism again. Okay, you didn't define it in the first place. This doesn't define terms really. I mean, sort of, but
Well, sort of. It's done pretty poorly, but yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I get what he's trying to say. It's probably a terrible way to do it, but sure, sure.
Atheism. Traditionally, the statements, I do not believe God exists and I believe God does not exist, have been treated as equivalent. The new
Hmm.
social media definition of atheism does not treat these as equivalent, or at least not necessarily. Thus, whereas the traditional definition of atheist has been one who says God does not exist, the new social media definition says an atheist is merely one who lacks a belief in God, or as above, the self professing atheist is merely saying, I do not believe God exists, and is not necessarily saying, I do believe God does not exist.
Yes, I would agree with that.
Okay. Yeah,
I
these,
mean, he's sort of saying social media as colloquial, like this idea that atheism is simply a lack of belief in God has been around before social media. Like it's been around for a
yeah,
while, and people have used it that way, colloquial, for quite
right.
some time. Um, you can sort of point fingers at maybe Huxley and his definition of agnosticism, but it's been around for social media. Just say colloquial definition. That's fine. It's only in philosophy of religion that the other thing is used because you want a true false to that specific proposition, that ontological proposition that says, does God exist? The reason why philosophy of religion doesn't acknowledge sort of atheism as a uncertain response is because it doesn't give that true false dichotomy, that answer to the proposition. But it's only used there. It's not used like that anywhere else, which is fine. I've got no problem with that. He wants to use the philosophy of religion definition. Just say that's what you're using. That's fine.
Naturally, this definition removes from the atheist, I don't know why atheist is capitalized, a burden of proof because the statement, I do not believe God exists, is merely stating a fact about the atheist, noting an absence of a particular belief in his worldview. Kind of assuming someone's gender there. I'm just kidding. In their view, asking them to defend their lack of belief is like finding out that someone doesn't have a $5 bill and asking, where did you get that? The question is nonsensical because there is no origin for something which isn't, and the lack of it is its own explanation.
No, no, that's not. What the hell? You're not
I'm,
asking what the hell?
yeah, I'm
Um,
very confused.
okay. So I think he's trying to say, like, basically what I said earlier, that the idea that I lack a belief in God doesn't answer the proposition, is there a God? And he's right, it doesn't answer that proposition. It's sort of saying, well, I'm not sure, or I'm unknown, or I do not believe that, but I can't demonstrate it false. It's so so the way that they categorize it, sort of in colloquial atheist talking, and just ordinary conversation, is you've got atheism, and theism. You've got Gnostic atheists or hard atheists who claim to know that God does not exist, or sort of says God does not exist. You have weak atheism, which says that, or agnostic atheism, which says, I don't know if God does not exist, but I don't believe it. Um, there's no problem with that sort of thing. I don't get, like, just because you believe a God does not exist doesn't mean that I don't understand the $5 bill thing. Where did
Yeah.
you get that?
Yeah. At least he admits that it's nonsensical.
The question is nonsensical. Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'm just gonna have to move on.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird.
This differs from I believe God does not exist because this statement immediately raises the question, why do you believe God does not exist? This person saying that something is, in this case, is absent, shoulders a burden of proof, meaning for their position to be logical and rational, it must be based on an intellectual foundation. Both the person saying God exists and the person saying God does not exist have this same weighted burden of proof, for there must either be reasons for their position or their position must be irrational. Thus, the new definition allows the atheist to declare himself an atheist without shouldering a burden of proof. So I don't know why atheist is capitalized sometimes, but I was kind of laughing reading this yesterday because it's like saying, I believe Santa Claus does not exist. Well, that immediately raises the question, why do you believe Santa Claus does not exist? Well, I'd probably answer because I know that
Right.
he's a mythical character
Mhm.
based on Saint Nicholas, and that I
Right.
know that you can't deliver presents all over the world in one night or live at the North Pole. And we
Yeah.
also, it's the same thing with knowing that holy texts were written by men. We know that humans came up with the myth of Santa Claus, and we know that Christianity is a mythology that's based upon Jainism and based upon the
Hmm.
Code of Hammurabi, and Noah's Ark is
Yeah.
based on Gilgamesh and all these other things. These are just myths that we know humans made up. And there you go. I just thought that was
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah, so without getting into the local versus global atheism, that would be a sort of I am an atheist, so I believe that God does not exist, and here are the reasons why. He's sort of just getting angry that people take like so basically in a conversation, he would take somebody saying, "Well, I have no proof for God, therefore I don't believe that a God exists," as an agnostic, and that's fine. Like if someone was like, "Oh, I'm an atheist," why don't you believe God exists? Well, basically saying, well, I don't believe in God, but I'm not taking the position that there is no God. I don't know that for sure. He would say, well, you're an agnostic then. And most atheists, or the atheists that I know would say, hey, call me an agnostic then. That's fine.
Yeah,
And
and
that would be the end of the conversation. That would be it.
mhm. Yeah, and just to respond to the comment in the chat, the thing about God being a necessary being, we'll get to that. That's coming up. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay. Do you want to take over reading for a second, Mark?
Yeah, so insisting the conversation ends at the declaration that one lacks belief in God's existence is intellectually dishonest. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. That's why the agnosticism position in philosophy of religion exists. It is dishonest to the persons who with them concerned, it's dishonest to themselves if they never continue the conversation with themselves to discover their underlying intellectual foundation. No, it's not dishonest. You can suspend you do not have to have the answer to a proposition to be honest. It's sort of like saying, asking somebody, hey, does a bacteria that can eat nylon exist? And they've got no idea, right? They don't know if it exists or not. And them saying, well, I don't know, I don't believe so, but I can't say for sure. And you saying, well, that's intellectually dishonest. You've got to answer the question. No, it's not dishonest. Like, I don't see why saying, well, I don't believe God exists, while he's just mad that they don't have a burden of proof. And they're right. They don't have a burden of proof because they're not the ones making a claim. Agnostics in this sort of philosophy of religion are not taking on a burden of proof. They are basically saying, hey, I'm not convinced a God exists. Demonstrate it to me. This guy's just mad that they don't have a burden of proof to prove him wrong. And we can show stuff like that with Russell's teapot. Examples where somebody makes claims like a teapot around Jupiter, and then it's not up to me to show that teapot around Jupiter. It's not up to you to disprove the teapot around Jupiter. It's up to me to show it, and there's a good reason for that.
Right. And I think that atheists, they don't tend to end the conversation when they say that they don't have a belief. Atheists are
Right.
usually very interested in having these conversations about the existence of God. And I think from now on, we're just gonna, when it says God, we'll just assume the Christian God just to simplify things.
Mm.
But if you think about it, like you said, the Christian is making the claim that God does exist. I think the
Yeah.
reason that atheists even make a claim, it's not a positive claim really, but even make the statement that they don't believe that Christian God exists, is because religion is so widespread in our culture, and it's considered out of the norm to be an atheist. So, because if not, we wouldn't really be saying it at all. We would just live our lives and not think about it, you know?
Mm.
But it's the fact that religion plays such a part, at least in the United States, that people feel the need to use their voice and stand up and say, "No, I am an atheist, not an agnostic. I have this actual position. I'm not making a positive claim. I'm responding to a positive claim that was made saying that I don't agree with it."
Mm.
But the original person has the burden of proof, I think.
Right. Whoever's making the claim does have the burden of proof. Now, there are claims that you can make. Like I basically make the claim there is no God. I take the hard atheist position. I didn't used to a while ago. I was more what this guy would call an agnostic. But I think after, and we can get on to reasons why, because sort of in his thing, sort of agnostics are a subset of atheists kind of thing. They have to be, because under his definitions, atheists, they don't believe in God. They lack belief in God. So do agnostics. But atheists go one step further and say God does not exist, and that is a claim. Now you can present, and this is the two reasons. So basically, you could split it up into number one under his definition of atheists, and number two is agnostics. So they're not confident in the absence of they are confident in the absence of God, right? So I would say, hey, I have a provisional belief that gods do not exist because we don't have any, like, it seems that a mind cannot exist without a brain. You need a brain to have a mind. It seems to be an emergent property of a brain. Now that's provisional. If you show me a mind without a brain, I will believe that, and I would probably change to agnostic, right? But until that happens, there's the evidence that I have seen leads me to think you need a brain to have a mind, and that's why I'm an atheist. Under his definition, I'm an atheist, like what we would colloquially call a hard atheist or a strong atheist, right? I actively believe that there is no God. The second one would be agnosticism. They are not confident in the absence of God. So that's basically saying, well, I've got no reason to believe a God. There's just nothing's being demonstrated to me, which is a fine position. It's funny that he sort of said, hey, that position is intellectually dishonest, and then sort of lists that as one of the reasons why one lacks a belief in God. Yeah,
Yep. And if somebody wants to say I have a burden of proof, like you said, I can get into reasons that back up my argument, I think. Now, the person might not accept them as good reasons, but if we're going to have the burden of proof shifted onto us, well, I still think I can back up my position, because I don't, really like the idea of, it's not running from the burden of proof, but this same argument has been going on for so long where theists try to shift the burden of proof onto atheists, and then it's just kind of a tired argument. It's like, well, if you're going to do that, then fine, I'll back up my position. I don't mind.
Yeah, and it's sort of, I think what we've got to separate here is that atheism is about belief, not ontological truths. So a lot of the time, especially presuppositionalists, Darth Dawkins famous for doing this. He basically will say, well, you're an atheist, you don't believe in God. Prove that God can't exist. And what he means is prove by logical necessity God can't exist. That's basically conflating ontology with epistemology. Like, there's a lot of things that are not logically impossible. Like Santa Claus is not logically impossible, right? You can't find a logical, sort of modal logic that will solve that problem, that will say, hey, that can't exist. But you still believe he doesn't exist, because of the evidence that you really went over, AJ. All of the background behind it, all of the reasons why it was invented. So it's this conflation with, well, you've got to prove with 100% pure rationality that God doesn't exist before you can have a belief that it doesn't. No, that's not how beliefs work. We believe a lot of things based upon the evidence we have, not on pure reason.
Yep, I would definitely agree.
Yeah, so it looks like he's basically going into explaining that the second position is agnosticism. That's fine. He doesn't have to take so long explaining that, he's using philosophy of religion definitions. Fine, it's agnosticism. Knock yourself out. Like I said, call it beaverism for all I care. I don't care. As long as we're clear on our terms, it doesn't really matter what the name is.
Do I need to scroll down?
Probably. I think you've got to scroll down to the end to close it and never open it again, but that's just my personal opinion.
So I'll just start here. Just as above, as far as their intellectual position is concerned, it is merely I don't know, which carries no burden of proof. The way many atheists of this kind adopt a burden of proof is by making claims based on their emotional or volitional positions instead of their intellectual position. If they say, I don't know, they have nothing to prove because they have not made any assertions about the world, but only about their own ignorance. I don't agree with that.
Love how he threw that in.
Yeah, he's using the word ignorance incorrectly here. Just because somebody doesn't believe in a Christian God doesn't mean they're ignorant of anything or ignorant of the religion.
Yeah, many will make statement beyond this as I don't know and neither do you. Or see, that's what they're doing is they're speaking colloquially. They're sort of saying I don't know if a God exists and I don't believe you do either. Right? I think that he's being very, very uncharitable with the way that he's taking these positions, kind of thing. He's kind of taking it as I don't know and neither do you, as taking it as a statement of declarative fact rather than an opinion of the evidence that you've provided.
Yeah.
No theist has ever proven the existence of God. Well, that's kind of true, and there's no problem with that. Like, just because you're saying, hey, no theist has ever demonstrated a God to me, doesn't mean you're saying, I'm taking the hard atheist stance as there is no God. So he's wrong. He's absolutely wrong. They've adopted the burden of proof because those state no. Rejecting somebody's assertion that a God exists is not taking on a burden of proof. He's 100% wrong there.
I might actually disagree with you, Mark, here, because I do think that the first part where it's just talking about atheists lacking belief, that's not a burden of proof. That's not a positive claim. But I do think going on to say no theist has ever proven the existence of God, that is a positive claim. That's a separate additional claim.
No, it's not. It's basically saying the same as I reject the theist stance because they have not sufficiently demonstrated it. It's exactly the same thing.
Okay.
It's basically saying no theist has ever proven the existence of God. That's just that's fine. It's basically saying, hey, you need to have more evidence before you assert that a God exists. That's fine.
Oh, well, I guess if somebody said no theist has ever argued for the existence of God, that would be
correct. That would be an assertion that is untrue. Yes.
Yeah, because we know that they have. They definitely do. Okay.
Oh,
I see what you're saying.
Relentlessly, they do. Yes.
Yeah.
Constantly. Yes.
For any atheist who believes they have a rational basis for asserting the absence of God, there can be any number of ideas they can point to for their own defense. However, the true burden of proof for the atheist is specific and significant. Because God's existence is metaphysically necessary, the only way to argue against his existence is to prove that his existence is impossible.
So that's begging the question. You're asserting that God is metaphysically necessary without actually demonstrating that's the case. So why is God metaphysically necessary is the question. Like, you can't just assert that and say, hey, well, he's metaphysically necessary. And that's why I thought this was a precept document, because that's essentially what they do. They say God is metaphysically necessary for either morality or
Existence itself.
yeah, for intelligibility, basically. These metaphysically necessary. My work is done here. I will return to my
You
planet.
can't know anything.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. So I think that this document is assuming that you've read his other document about the existence of God, where he does get into, he doesn't really give a good substantiation of why God is
Mm.
metaphysically necessary, but he elaborates on it a little bit, which is very poor, form to
Is it
just
kind of
assume.
tagged, the
What
transcendental argument?
basically it's the unmoved mover thing, the first domino, the uncaused
Oh,
cause.
yeah, yeah, prime mover. Okay.
Basically, yeah, that there has to be a first cause, which would only get
Cool.
you, even if I were to grant that it's true, it would still only get you to a deistic God. He's smuggling in the fact that it's the Christian God, the biblical God.
Well, it wouldn't even get you to a god. It would just get you to a first cause that may or may not be a god. There's
Right.
no right. These things that are smuggled in are more like sort of timeless, spaceless, immaterial, has a mind, is all powerful. And I mean, if you want, it depends. And you're 100% right, AJ. It depends on what god you're arguing. Because if you're talking about a triomni god, you
Right.
can easily prove that existence is logically impossible. You can easily do that with an omnipotent God. Just can a God create a rock that's too heavy to lift? It's a paradox. Logically impossible, therefore that God cannot exist. It's very easy to do. Now, he might not be arguing for that God, but what you notice is he's not actually defining the God. He's basically saying any God you can possibly imagine is metaphysically necessary. No, that's not the case, old lad. Something may be necessary. I would say that, but you haven't demonstrated it's a god.
Right. And I think that you just mentioned this, but he's again assuming the fact that it is a monotheistic God and not like a pantheon of gods or multiple gods.
Well, I
Again,
only
we're
skimmed
assuming that
the
it is a god and not just a first cause, like you said, but
right,
also
right.
that.
Well, I mean, look, I, I, I don't know whether he's arguing for a Christian God at all. I must admit, I only skimmed the document. I didn't actually see anywhere that he was talking about a Christian God. And
Well,
okay, he can argue
hashtag
for a
Jesus loves
theistic.
you.
Well, that's true, but that might not be the like. So his argument that he's putting out in this point, um, um, I don't know whether that's the argument he's making right here, kind of thing.
Yeah. Like I've seen the videos that this is based on, and I know that he is arguing for a Christian God, but like you said, it may not just it might not say that here, but he is.
Well, I think what they do is they want to establish a cloud, a vague cloud of God, and then they're going to work on putting their, cross on it, kind of thing. And sort of William Lane Craig does this a lot. He argues for this vague God and then says, oh, well, this God obviously does exist. Why is Christ the most likely one, or whatever? And then sort of edges towards it, kind of thing. But when you're looking at these arguments, I think to be charitable, you've got to look at what they're actually saying and not sort of take a hashtag as meaning, hey, they're adding that to their argument. I mean, this whole idea that God's existence is metaphysically necessary. I mean, he hasn't established that at all. At all. So taking this argument by itself, that is simply begging the question in this argument. And if he wants to establish that it's metaphysically necessary in his argument, he should have included it in here.
Right.
Like, why not include the argument in here? Like, just give a brief syllogism as to why God is metaphysically necessary. So just as I would leave out the, hashtag Jesus, say, hey, he's not arguing for a Christian God, I'd also leave out his argument for whatever it is that says it's metaphysically necessary. So this is just begging the question.
Yeah, fair enough.
and prove his existence is impossible. So this is the switcheroo that he's doing here. It's basically saying an atheist is someone that believes God does not exist, right? That's what he's saying an atheist is. But in order to not to be an atheist, you've got to logically disprove God, and that's the switcheroo. Because the reasons why we don't believe in something may not be sort of a pure logic thing, like the example I gave with you for Santa Claus, who's like logically and through sort of modal hard logic prove that Santa Claus isn't real. You can't do it. It's just we don't believe he's real because of the history of it and what we know about the world. And this is where they're doing the switcheroo. So you're expected to base your beliefs upon just logic, and I don't think that's a very good way to go through life.
Right. Okay. While this is easy to state, the weight of this burden of proof is insurmountable. To be a rational atheist, one must literally prove that someone which must exist cannot exist. This is akin to writing an essay to persuade the reader that words do not exist. This is making an argument that arguments are invalid. Clearly, no atheist has ever succeeded in this task, and very few have even claimed that it can be done. Because of the literally impossible nature of this task, no atheist has, and no atheist ever will, make the argument for atheism and against the existence of God, which is required to make a confidence in God's absence intellectually justifiable. That was a word salad sentence for sure.
Yeah, so he's basically saying that because God's existence is metaphysically necessary, you've got to provide a purely logical reason why God is impossible. Now, as I said, he's begging the question by saying metaphysically necessary. He might have an argument in another document, but it's not in this one. So the reason why I believe there's no gods may not be a logical sort of based on pure logic. It might be that there are things that I know about in my life that I don't believe that there is a God. I believe that's a made-up concept. And you touched on it before with all the reasons why, gods have been made up in the past. There's a lot of reasons to disbelieve a God exists, to go, hey, I don't think gods are real. I think they're made up. But like I said, he's doing a switcheroo by saying, hey, you've got to address the ontological impossibility of a God to justify your beliefs. And that isn't sort of how we usually justify our beliefs. We usually justify them on experiences and the things that we encounter. I don't believe a God exists. I believe that there is no gods because a mind cannot exist without a brain. And that's a provisional belief on the fact that every single time we see a mind, there is a brain producing it. It's provisional because I'm not saying it can't happen, but that is the experiences that I've had. And that's why I don't believe it. He's basically saying, hey, you've got to put together a metaphysical, logical argument that proves its impossibility. And to be an atheist, I do not. All I have to do is believe a God does not exist, even under his definitions of atheism.
Yeah. Would you mind if I showed a little video of his that is titled "Why God Must Exist"? It's like 3 minutes. All right, and this will give you a taste of this guy's interesting, I'll call it unique style of content. To be nice.
Unique. Today we're answering your listener mail. On the video, A Universe from Nothing, Baraka says, where did God come from? By the way, he was always here isn't a good enough answer. That answer is trying to answer the very question that you attempt to use to disprove atheism. That train of thought is essentially, why is there something instead of nothing? God. Why is God here instead of nothing? Well, I can't really answer that, so I'll just say the all-powerful God was always here. That totally solves that problem. The truth is that scientists are always trying to figure this out. What was before the Big Bang? After that, they will try to find out what happened before the thing that was before the Big Bang. This would continue infinitely. The difference between these scientists and the Christians that take Genesis literally is that while scientists keep trying to learn more and question more, the Christians are satisfied saying, the Bible doesn't mention anything before God, I'll just stop there. My dear Barak, A good question worthy of an answer. On the surface, this does seem to be the case. It seems like Christians are saying, the Big Bang can't be true because nothing can be uncaused. But if the Big Bang had a cause, what caused the cause? And what caused that cause? You wind up in an infinite regress, which is no better than an infinite past with no beginning, both of which leave you unable to account for existence at all. After all, if an infinite number of days or causes have to pass before today occurred, we would never have reached today, because you can't pass an infinite number of anything one at a time. So how did we get here? Obviously not through an uncaused explosion. God must have done it. But where did God come from? Was he made by a bigger God? And was the bigger God made by a bigger God? And was the bigger God made by a bigger God? Where does it end? The way the Bible...
Just chill out, bro. Okay? Just calm down.
You know what? He
Calm
doesn't.
down.
He doesn't sound too friendly. I got to admit. He said he was friendly, and he doesn't sound like it.
I'm scared, basically. I don't feel like...
I'm there for you, AJ. I'll protect you. I'll throw myself in front of the irrationality for you.
Thank you. I like his mic arm, though. I do like that.
Yeah. Solves this dilemma is not by saying God was always here, as if he existed through an infinite amount of time before he made us, but rather that God is eternal. The difference between eternal and infinite in the past is a very important difference. An infinite book would need you to read an infinite number of pages before you get to the page you're on. But the author of the book does not have to age inside of the story he is writing. Hamlet can't look back into his own history and find the birth of William Shakespeare. Shakespeare is everywhere in the story of Hamlet, and there is nowhere in the history of Hamlet where Shakespeare began. He just is. Similarly, God isn't in our story, he is our author. He doesn't age in our time, he made our time. But what about his cause? Well, in philosophy, we acknowledge the need for a first unmoved mover, someone to knock over the first domino so we can explain all the dominoes which are still falling. We also call this the first uncaused cause. This is not a cop-out, it's necessary. In fact, that's what we call it, a necessary being. Because you can't have an infinite regressive causes, there must be a first uncaused cause, a first unmoved mover, a timeless eternal cause of the temporal universe. So logically, God must exist. And he must exist not forever back in time, but before time, sort of outside of time. So do Christians say, the Bible doesn't mention anything before God, so I'll just stop there? No, sir. Philosophy shows us that the Bible describes God accurately when it says he is uncaused and eternal. God must exist. He cannot not exist. This is not the result of stopping the investigation. This is the result of following reason to where it has to lead. And as always, it leads back to the Bible.
As always, it leads back to the Bible. That's very good.
Yeah, so I think when he's using being there, he's kind of conflating a little. So I know that Aristotle used being as a state of affairs, like to be kind of thing, right? He's not using it like a human being. It's the state of being towards sort of a state of becoming, like a desired state kind of thing there in philosophy. And, you know, Michael Granada is in the chat. He will totally correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm very aware of his presence right there. But I don't think being necessarily means what we're saying, a necessary being, as in a human being or a agent kind of thing, something with a mind and goals and things like that. What we're talking about, I believe, is states. So he's kind of using that as a weasel word to get his God in there. There is nothing that says that sort of necessary state of affairs could not be the cosmos, for instance, outside of the universe. There's no reason why the universe could not be the necessary state of affairs. When you go back and time, well, time-space is what we're in, that is local to our universe. So when we're talking about the origins of the universe, when we're going back to before the Big Bang, and it said a lot, you know, what happened before the Big Bang, before is such a wrong word to use in that circumstance. Because if you sit there and say, well, what was before there is time, how do you get before when time doesn't exist anymore? It's sort of saying what color is transparent, right? So it's a nonsensical question, and the answer is that we don't know. we don't know what caused the universe, or I don't know. I don't believe it was a God, which makes me an atheist, 100%, for the reasons that I gave earlier. But, you know, if you're claiming that God started the universe, then you have the burden of proof to demonstrate that.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah. And the way I see it, the only thing that's necessary for our universe to exist, and I'll only speak about after cosmic expansion has started, because before Planck time, we don't know anything about that, but we can comment after that with a certain level of certainty. And it's all that's really necessary is just dark energy, which is the catalyst that causes the universe and the fabric of space-time to expand, and the splitting of the unified field into the four forces of the universe, or physics: gravitational, strong and weak nuclear force, and electromagnetic force, and quantum mechanics and gravity. That's all that's necessary. I don't see some sort of being in those things. I just see elements of physics, laws of physics, but it's certainly not something with a mind or a creator that would make one planet within a vast cosmos and care deeply about one nation among those specific apes on that one planet, you know?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a good reason to justify your belief that a God did not start the universe. That's fine, but the whole problem for him is that either he's using being wrong, or he's smuggling an agent, a embodiment of a God into this idea that there's a necessary cause. Basically, he's saying the cause is necessarily a God, but he hasn't demonstrated that is so. He's just asserted it without actually demonstrating it.
Yeah. Let me share my screen again just for this.
But I got to say, that does not at all address the problem where he basically said a God is what do you say? A God is necessary,
metaphysically
necessary. Yes, that doesn't address that at all.
Yeah, his explanation doesn't add much, really.
Nope, doesn't add anything. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. So, if you could just show my screen share again, I think we can.
Oh yeah, sorry, my bad.
We'll read a little bit more of this, and then I think we're almost at the hour mark. So, I think I don't know if we'll finish this, but yeah,
we're not going to finish this document. I don't know if we're ever.
Well, not the whole document, but maybe another page. Okay. Therefore, no one has earned the right to call themselves an atheist because they are unable to meet the intellectual foundation for a rejection of God's existence. All must, by default, admit that his existence is possible, whatever they may feel about the matter. In summary, this means that all atheists, on either definition, are in fact agnostics, and the use of the word atheist to describe any person is inaccurate and counterproductive.
Wow. Yeah, so this is basically atheists don't exist.
Yeah, God doesn't believe in atheists.
Basically, yeah. That's because somebody can't logically with pure modal logic show that God isn't logically possible, or logically impossible, I should say rather, then they have no right to disbelieve. That is akin to saying you can't show that Santa Claus isn't logically impossible, therefore you have to believe in Santa Claus. You can't show that leprechauns are not logically impossible, therefore you have to believe in leprechauns. There is so many things you could apply the same things to. And even if you want to go down this route of, oh, but I've shown he's metaphysically necessary. You haven't. I've shown that it's metaphysically necessary. All you have to do is define that leprechaun as metaphysically necessary, and bam, you've got to believe in leprechauns. You have to. he's this is why I think that this guy is a pre-sup. I just, like, everything about it screams pre-sup at me. This whole idea that God just has to be metaphysically necessary. Why is it metaphysically necessary? Why could it not be some other metaphysical cause, or even a physical cause? Why?
Exactly.
They just don't have an answer.
The 2 points which are concluded in this argument are: anyone using the word atheist to describe themselves is in fact admitting to being an agnostic, and atheists do not exist.
Yep.
So that's it.
There's a house built on sand right there. Wow.
But yeah, we finished it. That's the first section.
Well, the thing is that atheism is about a belief position as well. So if you believe there is no God, so even if, like, he could argue that as an atheist you're 100% wrong, right? You are, and maybe in his insane world he can demonstrate that you are 100% wrong about your beliefs. It still doesn't change that you're an atheist. It still doesn't change your position on the proposition, because, and this is where he's sort of trying to conflate ontology and epistemology. He's saying because it's ontologically true, you can't hold this belief position. I can be completely and utterly wrong and still be an atheist. It's about your belief, your stance on a proposition, not what is ontologically true. So atheists do not exist? No, people that believe that God doesn't exist still do exist. Just because you say they're wrong, or just say they are wrong, just say that God definitely exists or is metaphysically necessary, or whatever it is you don't want to demonstrate, just say that's true. They're still atheists, regardless of whether they're wrong or right. So I don't know how he does this, terrific hurdle from epistemology into ontology and then back again to prove that there is no such thing as an atheist. It's ludicrous.
Yeah, and I could be wrong here, but I get the feeling that there are certain theists like this guy, and also like Kent Hovind. There are Christians who are so devout in their belief, they simply can't understand why other people aren't Christians. They can't comprehend that. That's what it seems like to me. So they make up these ridiculous excuses, or they just make these ridiculous claims that people aren't atheists. They're either lying, or that you can't even be an atheist, that it's a illogical position in the first place. And that's why one of my favorite arguments is just to tell theists, or Christian, well, you don't accept the Bhagavad Gita. You're not a Hindu. You're an atheist to that religion. You're an atheist to all these religions all over the world. I don't even know how many there are. Certainly thousands or tens of thousands, probably. It's just that we say we're an atheist to one more.
Like I said earlier, that's getting into like real muddy waters where you're talking about global or local atheism. So technically an atheist wouldn't believe in any God, no matter what God was being proposed. So they basically say gods do not exist, no matter what the God being proposed. So it doesn't really matter. However, it is a good point. Like, if you're claiming this God is creating the universe, you should define what the God is. Like, you should be able to describe it in some way so you can make a justified belief on it. The tactic that's being used now is to not take that, I mean, that last debate I did on modern day debate, they do not want to go down the route of putting any attributes to the God, so you could say, hey, that God is logically impossible. So the idea is to keep it as nebulous as possible, as vague as possible, because if somebody says, hey, the God's omnipotent, and you say, well, omnipotence is logically impossible because the God can't create a rock that it can't lift, right? Then they have a flaw. You can show that the God is logically impossible. And so they won't define it. They will not go down that route. And that's what Darth Dawkins does. He does not. That's what Pine Creek did when Darth Dawkins said, he just said, okay, I believe in a God. Now let's talk about your God. He went, oh, conversation over. don't want to talk about it.
Yeah,
You know,
LPP
they'll-
does that too.
absolutely, yeah, he
And
does. He has a God belief, but he refuses to talk about it, and that's why Kent Hovind will not discuss the creationism model.
Yeah.
He won't, because he gets caught with these attributes that they give to God that work out to be flawed, essentially.
Yeah. And I just wanted to say, with omnipotence, you also get into the problem of evil also. If you have an omnipotent God that could prevent things, I think you also get into that.
Well, it kind of has to be omnibenevolent as well. So, if you want to say, hey, God does whatever he wants and he's not, a good God or that has no necessity to be good, then the problem of evil isn't a problem.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah.
I will say, you brought up Kent Hovind, and the reason that I think me and him spent so much time in my debate with him talking about him getting creation material in public schools is because whenever somebody tries to get him to defend his creationist beliefs, he goes to his get out of jail free card, which is that, oh, I'm not trying to get it taught in public schools. If I did, then I'd have a burden of proof.
Right.
And it's like, well, if I can show that you are doing that you do want that, then doesn't that mean you do have the burden of proof?
100% he wants that, and it's easy to see this guy is a Hovind disciple. His arguments are absolutely malformed. I mean, look at this. Look, therefore, no one has earned the right to call themselves an atheist. Look, I could call myself a hedgehog. It doesn't really matter. It's not up to you.
The exact same thing. I can call myself whatever I please.
Right. Like, it's not, and this is sort of speaking colloquial. You may say you are not an atheist in sort of philosophical circles. That's fine. Like, whatever. It doesn't worry me. I don't live in philosophical circles as much as, you want to drag me in there. That's fine. But I do, because I do meet the requirements of what it is an atheist under philosophy of religion. Because they are unable to meet the intellectual foundation for a rejection of God's existence. All must by default admit that his existence is possible. It may be logically possible, but that doesn't mean that it is physically or possible in reality. There's all kinds of things which are logically possible. It doesn't mean they exist. Look, if I say, hey, a pink unicorn is logically possible on my desk, it doesn't mean that it exists. And just because something is logically possible doesn't mean that I have to believe in it. It can be logically possible and still not exist. Logic doesn't tell us things about the world that are actually in reality. It only tells us whether they are possible or not. And so this argument sort of follows that if God's logically possible and he's, sort of necessary, then he must exist in some possible world. If he exists in some possible world, and that's the tag argument, basically, I believe, then he must exist in this world, kind of thing. You haven't demonstrated that he's a necessary being.
Right.
Or a necessary agent, I would say, is more accurate, but you haven't demonstrated that to be the case.
And really, they shouldn't have to. I mean, he's saying that, oh, we must admit that God's possible. If he's necessary, then he shouldn't even need people making this argument. We should just all know that he does exist because it's required for the existence of the universe. It is necessary. And instead, he's making the argument that, oh, well, my God is necessary, and to say that you don't believe in him, you have to admit that it's possible. It's like saying to be an atheist, you have to be an agnostic, is what I'm getting from that argument.
Well, I think sort of agnostics are a subset, because under philosophy of religion, the definitions that he's using, all atheists and agnostics lack a belief in God. All of them do. You can't be an atheist and actively believe there is no God without lacking that belief, right? You have to lack that belief in order to believe there's no God. But it's just that agnostics don't take that one step further to say, hey, I believe there is no God.
Mark, do you think it's possible that maybe this document was just designed to get atheists confused and running around in circles as a tactic, a warfare tactic against us, so we
No,
don't get anything done?
I was going to say it's too long-winded, but you're right. I mean, we're going through it at the moment. Actually, I find it kind of funny that people make these really bad arguments and then sort of pad around it. I mean, the next thing he goes on to do is quote Mythbusters for his arguments. I mean, why? Like, why? Not that I got anything wrong against Mythbusters, but why would you introduce that into a document? For God, like,
I have some problems with Mythbusters. I feel like that they always say, "Oh, we're testing this myth," but their version of the myth is never quite the same as what the myth is stated at the beginning of the show. They'll always present a myth, but their actual version of it, it's like, well, your analog is kind of not really the same thing, though. Do you know what I mean? Or am I
yeah.
crazy?
Yeah, I think that they're experiments. I mean, they try to make it as parallel to the actual myth as possible. But yeah, you're right. There's always limits on it, and
Sure.
I do agree with you. However, I think that's made up for by them promoting some scientific experimentation at all. I think it's important that we do experimentation to find out whether things are actually possible in reality. So it would be like saying, hey, there's this myth that says, say bullets passing through water, will stop bullets. So if you shoot into water, it will stop bullets. I remember that was one of my favorite things from Mythbusters, because they always do it in the movies, right? The bullets go into the water and the hero swims through and the water stops them from getting shot, right? So it's sort of like saying, well, prove that's logically impossible, right? Like, prove with logic how that's impossible, or else you have to believe it. That's sort of this argumentation. And at the risk of offending Michael, and I'm so sorry, Michael, but I think philosophy has a really good place to create these frameworks of thought and how we rationally think about stuff. At a certain point, you have to say, well, scientific experiment has got to take over, and we've got to experiment and find out what's actually possible in physics and reality, rather than just sort of what's possible and impossible through sheer rationality, because it won't get you there. It just won't. I don't know if you agree with that or not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to say that so I know Hive Science just started streaming, and I would like to recommend that everybody, when they finish watching this, go over and check out
Yes.
her video and subscribe, because they're almost to 1,000 subs.
Yeah, Bree's amazing. And I just want to give a shout out to some of the people out there. Titan, Maya, good to see you. Carol the Atheist. I love you all. Ox and Tim and Wilberforce and everybody out there. I think I saw Sunflower in there earlier. Gur, love your work. I owe you an email, Gur. Yeah, Top Dog, good to see you. Just tons of people here. I really appreciate everybody. Do consider giving a like and subscribe if you do feel like it. I'm going to try and grow my channel. I apologize for being a bit, I haven't been typing a lot lately, so I've been a bit less on responses. I've got a numb finger, little pinky, and the doctor said it might be like the starts of RSI, so I'm really taking it easy, and I do apologize, but I've got anti-inflammatories and going through them, so I thought I'd just say that. Are you happy to leave it there, AJ?
Yeah, I am. I will
Okay.
say, I think there was about 30 people watching at the peak, which is really awesome.
Yeah, thanks so much, everybody.
I'll answer, I guess before we wrap up, I'll answer a question I got tagged in the chat from both of us got tagged. It just says, do you think understanding is a key to world peace? I think that's a little bit too vague. I would say that education is the key to world peace, no matter what, even in terms of things like substance abuse, education, drugs, sex education, I think is a big thing that's needed in more schools in America, because we have a real problem, especially in my state of Texas, with teen pregnancies and repeat teen pregnancies because of abstinence-only sex education. And the more informed people are. I think the thing that kills bigotry is understanding and education. Being educated can also include socially, like bigots, they think that everybody of a certain group is the same. But if you meet
Mm,
people from that group, if you meet people from different walks of life, and if you befriend them, you'll see that that's not true. And
mm.
so, world peace, I think the key to it, if you have to narrow it down to one thing, I would just say that. Uh, what do you think?
Yeah. No, I get you. It's sort of, I think what you're describing there, and do correct me if I'm wrong, AJ, is sort of connections with people is the key to, or understanding, other people is the key to world peace. And I couldn't agree more. So the idea, and I agree with AJ completely, sort of knowledge, what you're talking about when you're talking about knowledge is kind of, it's a fuzzy concept kind of thing. So I agree that education is a really good start. I totally agree that sort of understanding other people is the key to world peace. I think that and I'll sort of say knowledge, like true knowledge, is very good to get there. But as somebody once said, that it's not what you know that's the, or what you don't know that's the problem, it's what you know that just isn't true. So when we talk about knowledge, and maybe you're defining knowledge as justified true belief kind of thing, but yeah, it has to be true. And this I think that's particularly pertinent in this age of misinformation, where
Hmm.
we're blaming another country for a pandemic that affects us all, and we could work together. We're creating problems between states, where we're blaming other countries for things. It's very, we've got to be very wary about what we know and what we don't know, and that the tools that we're using will actually give us true knowledge rather than false knowledge, which is why science is so important.
Yeah, and that's what we do, the content that we do, is to try and engage discussion or encourage discussion, and
Mm,
hopefully get people to think about some things that they might not have. Like, there were some things about this when I read this document yesterday, where basically I thought was wrong, and you had corrected me on it, or given me a different perspective, if you don't want to use the word corrected, a perspective that I hadn't seen. And that's why I think this type of content is important, because it fosters discussion and it gets people thinking.
yeah,
Um, and even if we're going over the same arguments that we have before, it's good because for us as content creators and atheist activists, the iron sharpeneth iron. So it's good to work the brain out like any other muscle, and engage it in stuff like this, and
I
debunking
hate that
arguments and all of it.
expression.
Oh,
I
really?
hate that expression. Yeah, I hate that expression. Just because, like, if you hit iron with iron, you're just going to blunt it, right? Like, I get what it's saying, kind of thing. But
Oh,
and
what
I
it's saying then?
totally agree. Yeah, well, I totally agree. You should, like, seek people out that challenge your worldviews, and sort of um, present other arguments and other considerations as well. I love my talk with Reid the other night, because it was just, she and her disagreed on something, and it was fantastic. It was she really gave me stuff to think about. I love it. But I don't know, iron sharpens iron. I don't, maybe because I've only heard it from Christians, maybe
Yeah, I
I
think
have
that's from
some
the Bible.
bias. Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I just, yeah, it annoys me, but I don't know why. But maybe it's because, like, if you do hit iron with iron, you're just going to blunt it. I suppose you can always sharpen stuff up by, whatever. I'm really being pedantic right now. I'm sorry. Yeah, Dawn, I'm right with you, and I want to give a big shout out to our Caterpillar, who is an amazing person, and I love them so much. So, thank you, everybody. Have you got anything more to add? What are you up to, AJ? What have you been doing? You've been putting up some more videos lately. I have seen that. You've
Yeah,
done debate
I
reviews.
yeah,
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I did a stream yesterday that was uh, the part 2 of my Whack and Atheist stream about Professor Dave and Ken Hovind. It was actually my 20th stream, my 20th Whack and Atheist stream. So I have a playlist of those, and it was the 20th one I did.
Nice.
And I was happy to see that I did it yesterday, and then I went and checked back the views today. I don't know if what I was expecting, but it was at about 3,300 views, which surprised me.
Nice.
I'm really happy to see that my community is really supportive. Even if I take some time off and come back, that they're still going to watch the videos when I do put something out, which is really happy to see. And I can see that you're growing fast, and I wager that you'll have a similar community of people who are supportive, because I've seen the comments and I've read the comments. But the next video I do will likely be on a channel called Mud Fossil University, if you're familiar with that.
Oh, yes. Yep.
Very,
Geology for dummies. Yeah.
very different channel. And yeah, I'm
should be good,
also doing a collaboration soon with this guy named Ryan, who debated Kent Hovind, and he did a very nice video where he was reacting to my Kent Hovind impression video, and there was a lot of very nice comments in the comment section of that. So yeah, we're going to be scheduling that soon. I think you and me have more collabs coming up. We're going to do our video with Michael, and yeah, just lots of stuff in the month of
I would
December.
love to get another tag debate, team debate with you. Like,
Yeah,
as a
I've been
partner. Not
thinking about
against
that
you.
too.
I know you've been on the receiving end of my debate before.
Yeah, no thanks. But I've been thinking the same thing, though.
Yeah, I'd love to team up with you again, mate. That would be fun times. Actually, I'm just looking at your channel now. I just ran over to get the URL for it. Your one of your last sort of review on Kent's interview has got 9.8k views, which is so good. That is insanely good.
Thank you. I appreciate
Fantastic. Yeah, no, that's great, AJ. No, AJ's fantastic. I highly recommend subbing to AJ and following what he's doing, because his stuff is amazing. If you do like Hovind getting crap, then definitely check out Big Bad Mama as well.
Yes.
She does some funny stuff. I'll just grab her thing.
Yeah. They're somebody that I can always bounce ideas off of, which is very useful.
Yeah, so Big Bad Mama does really short, pithy, kind of really funny stuff about these DAL miscreants, should I call them? So it always gives me a giggle. So I really do recommend them as well. Do we have anything else to add? Any other?
I think that's about it. I would just recommend people, when this stream ends, to go over to Hive Science and give them some viewership.
Yeah,
and a sub.
Reid does amazing work, and I think you put that in the thingo, didn't you?
Yeah, I can add it again though.
Yeah, if you could, and I'll pin it just while we're on the way out.
But yeah, I watched a little bit of you guys collab, and I was really enjoying myself. I was watching the Halloween one. I guess that's older, but
yeah,
I liked that video.
Okay, there's Bree. We're gonna raid her channel and Titan. You don't subscribe to Titan. He doesn't actually do anything except moderate, but boy, does he do it well. Oh boy. No, I love you, Titan. You're awesome. I will link Titan because what? No, Titan is fantastic.
Well, yeah, I think
no problem.
I think that's pretty much it.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us. It's been my pleasure, and a pleasure to have Atheist Junior on anytime. You are wonderful, sir. I really enjoyed that. And you know, have a great day or night. Go over to Breeze. Tell her she's fantastic and that Mark Reid sent you to annoy her. So do that, and I will be a happy person. Be kind to yourself and to each other. Thank you so much.
Yep. See you guys in the next one.